big enough to beat him? Like seriously, like we were physically fighting? Yeah. Because you guys just beat the hell out of him?
We are live.
All right, well, we'll start the meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone out to the December 8th meeting of the Kaysville Planning Commission. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving and looking forward to the holiday season. Just wanted to acknowledge that this would be Commissioner Doxey's last meeting. Want to thank him for his service over the last 3 years. Appreciate all that he's done. I'd like to acknowledge the people in the crowd. Thanks for coming out. I'm sure a lot of you would like to comment on some of the items tonight, and there will be public hearings where we'll open that up for you to be able to comment. Also, I'd like to acknowledge anybody that's online and just welcome everyone to participate in the meeting tonight. Our first item of business is just to approve the minutes from the November 10th Planning Commission meeting, and just hope that the commissioners have had a chance to review those meeting notes. Any proposed additions or subtractions from those meeting notes? If not, I would be willing to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the November 10th, 2022 meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, so we've got a motion to approve and a second. Let's do a voice vote all together. All those that are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the meeting minutes are approved unanimously. Our next item of business is a public hearing for the text amendments for should we read all of these?
Yes, please.
Okay, I will read every single one of them.
I have them up on the screen.
Okay, so
you can maybe
I'll just refer to the screens.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll refer to the screen. So we'll be this is a public hearing for all the text amendments for the articles or the items listed on the screen. And do we have to do these like individually, or can we do them all together as one?
You can do them all together. At the
Okay.
end, when you're ready to make the motion, you can just even say all of the ones referred to and the staff report and do it all in one motion.
Okay, so we'll do this all in one motion, but we'll turn the time over to the staff to present this, their information on this.
All right. So this text amendment is to essentially take out of the land use code the provision of owning household pets. I've not worked in a community previously that has had in their land use code the ownership of household pets. That's usually governed under your animal services or your public safety title. So that's exactly what we're doing here. The council at I think 2 meetings ago adopted code that actually increased the amount of pets a household could have from 2 to 3. There's also a provision that if they wanted a 4th, they could go through an application process to be approved for that. We have our animal services provided for through Davis County, and they asked all of the cities that they serve that we have consistent numbers of pets so that they don't have to refer to every city's individual ordinance. And so that's the motivation that the council had to change that. And then in addition, it is pretty common for households to have 2 or 3 pets, whether you have a couple dogs and a cat or vice versa. So they chose to increase that from 2 to 3, and then again, you can have a 4th if you go through an application process. So the text amendments, as we listed with those here on the screen, all of that is just removing the verbiage from the permitted use section entirely. We're changing the definition for kennel only. We're eliminating the household pet definition because, again, we're removing it out of Title 17. And then kennel, which we do consider a land use item, they have changed that from 3 to 4 And so that's really the only change that would go forward with that. There was one section, the Central Commercial District had the household pets listed under conditional uses versus permitted uses. And then in the mixed use overlay, it also was listed as an allowed use. So we're removing that from all of the residential sections in the code. We're not changing anything with the rest of the chapter. Like I said, that the council already approved that was, so it's just for Title 17. So this essentially is a housekeeping item to make consistent with what the city council did in their meeting, I think it was in October. And then when the commission makes a recommendation on, we'll take this to the city council and probably just put it on the consent agenda since they've already approved the action previously. That really makes this a housekeeping item.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So this does require a public hearing. So just a couple of ground rules. For the public hearings, we're going to keep our comments to 3 minutes. So if anybody wants to speak to this, we'll have Mindy from the staff time that. So we'll do that on the other public hearing as well. We'll open the public hearing now. Are there any members of the public here tonight that would like to speak to this item? If you'd like to, just come to the podium at this time. Looks like there's no takers on this, so we're going to close the public hearing. So there are no comments from the public on this. So we just need to turn the time over now to the commission to have any discussion. Is this pretty straightforward? We just want to go ahead and vote, or is there any discussion needed?
I'd just like to thank staff for their time. I think this is a lot of lift when you have to do this. Appreciate their time and effort in aligning this and making sure this fits in. I know the county code often is with the animal services dictates this versus local ordinances, and this brings us into alignment with that. So I appreciate their time in doing this. And I would move approval of all text amendments on agenda item number 3 as directed by staff for Kaysville City Code Title 17 regarding the allowed use of household animals.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we got a motion to approve the text amendments by Commissioner Lyon and a second from Commissioner Allred. We'll start the voting with Commissioner Allred.
Aye.
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 Aye?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the voting is unanimous in favor of passing or recommending that approval. So we'll go on to the next item of business. This is a public hearing for a rezone application for 391 North Flint Street from John V. Flint and Shauna S. Flint to go from A1 Light Agricultural District to an RM Multiple Family Residential District with a mixed-use zoning district overlay over a portion of the property. So we'll turn the time over to the staff to give the report.
Thank you. All right, I first want to just kind of address the public for a minute here. First of all, thank you all for being here tonight and taking time out of your busy lives to join us. The land use process is one of the most complex processes that we have to deal with as a government entity. Because of that, oftentimes the public just isn't familiar with the process. And so I wanted to just give a little preface before we get into the rezone, the presentation here of how this works. So the Planning Commission tonight, they serve as a recommending body to the City Council. And the City Council is what we call the Land Use Authority on rezones. So they will go through the presentation tonight. We'll have time for the applicant to address the commission as well. And then as we just had with the pet ordinance, we'll have a public hearing where anyone is free to get up and share their thoughts on the project. And then what'll happen is the commission then will have discussion amongst themselves and ultimately come up with a recommendation that'll be sent on to the city council. And depending on what happens here this evening, that could be the first meeting in January, or it could be the second meeting, not entirely sure. I think this will be a lengthy discussion tonight, so you know, plan on staying for a little while anyway, much longer than the pet ordinance took to pass. And then on your way home, you can go find that third or fourth pet that you want to get for Christmas. So again, this is, I do also want to say that this is the first time Kaysville City has had a mixed-use project come forward. The mixed-use ordinance was passed, I think last fall. I joined the city just about a year ago. So the ordinance was adopted prior to my arrival here. I have come from communities that have had several mixed-use projects, and so on the scope of things that I've dealt with, this is a pretty straightforward and a very simple project. But that said, we will do our best to address the questions that the commission has, and then through the public comment, hopefully throughout the presentation, a lot of the questions that you may have will be addressed. And we'll just do our best to kind of communicate back to the public of some of the comments that we've already received with our process. But that said, I'm just going to get into a little bit more particulars of the project. I think everyone is here. We know this is a rezone request for 391 North Flint Street. A portion of the property is requested to go to RM with a mixed-use overlay, and then the other portion of the property is requested to just go to residential multifamily. One of the things that we often talk about in land use is density, and so with the property as it sits now, it's zoned A1, and that has a minimum lot size requirement of 40,000 square feet. So in theory, if the property were to be subdivided today, they could fit 7 single-family dwellings on there. The zoning request, again, is the RM with a mixed-use overlay. The RM doesn't, the density is a little bit difficult to pinpoint on this, but the RM portion is 4.59 acres, and the underlying zone of the residential multifamily could allow, with that acreage, up to 71 units. This project is only proposing 46, and then for the RM mixed-use portion, there is no assigned density to that. Rather, density is limited based on the height of the buildings and then what you can park. So, so with that one, there's 36 proposed on that portion of the property. I'll talk a little bit more about density here in a moment, but I was kind of start with a very high-level overview of the project. This is an aerial of the property where it sits. You can see we have Smith's Marketplace and some really fun commercial areas over there today. I grabbed lunch. And then we have the rail trail. We have some existing single-family residents that are on the north side of the parcel there. And then across the street, we have some light industrial. This is just kind of a more regional aerial view of the property, so we can get a closer look at that business park we have. We can see the proximity to the park, and then just a little bit greater look at what's out there to the north with the existing neighborhoods, and then again across the rail trail. One of the things that we also like to look at when we consider zone changes is what's going on right now in the area, and does the requested zone change fit within those uses. There's quite a variety of uses that are going on in the area. Again, to the north and the west of the property, we have the R120 zoning. We have some RA zoning. We've got the light industrial, which is the purple. And then I also today took a chance to drive through this little community again over here, is where you have a little bit more of a dense project with the housing. And then, of course, I was actually surprised to find out, and I think somebody called or came in today to ask this, but I would have assumed that the property that Smith's Marketplace and all of those commercial entities are on would be zoned general commercial, but it's not. It's light industrial. So that was
And they left it light industrial.
a bit of a surprise to me, but the uses are still allowed through light industrial with what's over there. So the next thing that I like to look at when we consider a zone change is this future land use map, which is one component of our general plan. This is kind of the easiest way to look at a proposed project or to give feedback to a property owner to say what you can and can't do with your project. But the future land use map does show that this property is to remain as single-family residential. But I do want to just note that this is not the only component of the general plan. I'll get a little bit more into detail with that. So a general plan is a document that a community uses to generally guide what they feel like may be the next 5 or 10 years of development. And a lot of times we're accurate in those future ideas that we have, and sometimes things change, and that necessitates maybe looking at different opportunities with a portion of property or with a parcel of property within a community. So the general plan is really meant to be what we call a guiding document, or we refer to it as a living document. And so, I have another slide in just a minute that I'll show, but we don't necessarily want to draw really hard lines with the maps that we have in the zone or in the plan. We don't necessarily want to just stick our, hang our hats on just one component of that plan. But the overall plan, which was just finally adopted by the City Council in August, and then we just amended it in November to get in compliance with state requirements for moderate income housing. But the general plan is composed of kind of 5 guiding principles. And one of those 5 is that we provide diverse housing options. And so looking, kind of lowering that 30,000-foot overview, you start digging into the general plan to see what would make sense, what fits within the general plan. And when we adopted this plan, one of the 5 overarching principles was that we really wanted to pay attention to the diversity of housing options. So that said, I think this project does fulfill that guiding principle. What we then like to do is, and I really think that in respects to the general plan, your goals and objectives that you have at the end of each of those chapters are really kind of the nuts and bolts of the general plan. Does a project that's proposed fit within those goals? Does it meet those objectives? And so going through each of the chapters in the general plan, the first chapter was the land use and placemaking plan. So there were a couple of goals and objectives within that particular chapter that felt relevant to this project. The one was goal 7, to ensure that land uses are compatible and to utilize adequate buffers to enhance compatibility. Again, when we talk about the project, get into a little bit more specifics of that. But generally speaking, if there's a large freeway or a large commercial use like Smith's Marketplace, that might not be the most ideal place for half-acre lots or $350,000, $400,000 lots and homes that are $1 million plus. So we do like to look at those types of uses and are they compatible? Is there an appropriate buffer? And again, further on, I think that we'll kind of address some of those buffering questions, but another goal in Chapter 1 was to provide a range of housing options and price points that help ensure Kaysville is an affordable place to live. I do want to say that the general plan calls out that 92% of the housing in Kaysville is single-family housing. This project proposes some more density, a little bit, some attached housing, some townhomes, some apartments. That's something that really Kaysville is lacking, and so having those different types of housing available, I think, fits well within this project and this particular goal. So going back to the comment I made just a bit ago about you don't necessarily want to draw hard lines on your maps because, again, this is a general guiding document. But we do have in Chapter 1, they have defined kind of a city center. And this is a screenshot that does kind of go south here through this Main Street area. But this is a screenshot of the area we're discussing this evening. Again, here's the business park. We have our light industrial uses that we have here, but right here on Flint Street, they have designated that some of these properties could be used in the future for mixed use. So when you look at then the Flint parcel here, in context, we do have this commercial use. We have our ideas that these properties here in the future may go to a mixed use type of a use. And so is it all that much of a stretch to continue that just right across the street, especially when there's that commercial right there? And, that's really in the end for the Planning Commission and the City Council to decide. But, I don't think that's too much of a stretch to just say, well, if we're doing it right across the street or we anticipated it right across the street, we could anticipate it, on the west side of Flint Street. But again, to be fair, if you do want to just look at the purity of this, it does not call out that this property would be used for mixed use. It does call for it to be residential, which if you look here, the code is orange is residential. The overlay parcel of the mixed use may not necessarily fit in there, but RM, the residential multifamily zone, is a residential zone. So if you're just looking at that from a strict use category, whether it's attached housing or detached housing, both of those would fall under this category. Chapter 2 is our transportation and connectivity plan. I will say this, that driving through Kaysville, and as I have in my year here tried to take some time to drive through various neighborhoods, and there's not a lot of connectivity, but there are a lot of cul-de-sacs. And I think that's one thing that, it's great to live on a dead end or a cul-de-sac, but also that creates a lot more vehicle travel. It creates a lot more congestion, longer vehicle trips. So we really do like to look at having connectivity through a community where it can be done and where it makes sense. So one of the goals, again, in Chapter 2 is to preserve and enhance access to and from the greater region. This property is on Flint Street. It's a very well-traveled, busy street that leads directly into Layton and the hospital area over there. It is a bit of a regional access. One of the objectives in the chapter talked about reducing travel demand for single occupancy vehicles. And from a purist standpoint, mixed use is designed to try and limit the amount of vehicle trips a person would make. So, you know, as an example, my husband and I were cooking dinner a few weeks ago. He came home from the grocery store, we get into making dinner, and we didn't have one ingredient. And he's like, do you want me to go back and get it? I'm like, no, it's too far, it's a pain. But if we lived, you know, right across the street from Smith's Marketplace, it may be a different answer to that, when you could just walk over there, walk back. And so we don't expect that mixed-use projects would eliminate the need for vehicles or that they would eliminate vehicle travel, but it makes it more convenient to be a pedestrian and more convenient to have multiple types of services in one area. Objective 2.3 is to create a connected network. One of the proposals of this project is to connect from Flint Street onto the existing Pleasant View Drive. And then Objective 2.5 is to leverage and expand trail corridors. The project also proposes to have a connection over onto the rail trail, and that could also assist in access to the commercial area to the south, and but the connectivity and expansiveness of those trail corridors is something that's pretty important. The next chapter that had elements that supported this zone change request was chapter 3, which is our housing and neighborhoods chapter. This is the chapter that was just amended, and those of you in the audience may not know, but every year the state legislature, at least for the last 5 or 6 years, has made laws that have really made it so that cities have to consider, with the land use development, they have to consider what they call moderate income housing, which they define as housing affordability at 80% or below the area median income. So we just amended this last month and got the news that we are in compliance. We're one of 19 cities that were in compliance with our moderate income housing plan. I don't think I've gotten that far to tell you, Commission, but 83 cities had to submit. We were one of 19 that were in compliance, so I was pretty happy about that. But the revisions that we just made to that plan really support this application pretty directly in a couple ways. And it is difficult when we talk about moderate income housing to say, like, are these going to be market value? Are they going to be affordable? What's affordable? Well, it just kind of depends. But there is definitely, I think, the obvious answer that the more dense you are, the more attached walls you have, the more affordable the housing can become. And so the state had a list of 24 items outlined in state code. The cities had to adopt at least 3 of those strategies to incorporate into the moderate income housing plan. The city council chose these 2, taken word for word from state code, to adopt into our general plan. So objective 1.3 is rezone for densities necessary to facilitate the production of modern income housing. And then objective 1.4, which really hits the nail on the head for this one, but this is to zone or rezone for higher density or modern income residential development, commercial or mixed use zones, near major transit investment corridors, commercial centers, or employment centers. So I think both of these objectives that are outlined in chapter 3 really do support the zone change request. Now I just want to take a little bit of time to go over the project in a little bit more detail. So again, the project is to kind of divide the property into 2 areas. The mixed use parcel that would front Flint and take about nearly 2 acres of the property. The project includes, as proposed, 18,000 square feet of commercial space. There's 4 3-story commercial buildings which would include ground floor commercial and then 2 stories of apartments. And then on the north side of the proposed connector road, there is a 2-story building with ground floor commercial and then 1 story of apartments over that. All total on the mixed use overlay parcel, they're talking about 36 residential units, and then they provided 97 parking stalls. The RM parcel is 4.59 acres. That's again the westernmost part of the property. They're proposing 46 units, a mix of 16 single or twin homes, single family or twin homes, 30 townhomes. They do have quite a bit of open space, which would serve both sides of the project, but 1.8 acres or 27% of the space would be open space, and that includes the walking path around the project, playground, and then again the connection to the rail trail. Each of the units that they're proposing would have dedicated parking for their unit. Overall, the project would have 82 residential units. That's at a density of 12.7 units per acre. So the RM zone on its own allows about 15 units to the acre. So this is actually less dense than what the RM zone allows for. I think that's notable. The project also, again, would create a public road that would connect Pleasant View Drive over to Flint Street. They are also willing to provide water-wise landscaping throughout the development where it makes sense. They would provide a fence on the north side of the property and then some buffering with the trail landscaping and some of the housing types. So just a little bit more in particular in the project. And I should also say that the mixed-use zone requires that a project come forward with a development agreement. So a lot of these items that I'm going to discuss as I kind of go over this project are outlined in the development agreement, which ensures that when the project, if the project does come forward, that they would be held to the commitments that they've made. So again, we have these homes that exist right here to the north of the property, and the development team has been, I think, pretty thoughtful with trying to mitigate impact with them. Part of that is having the trail that comes around on the north side. Again, we talked about putting trees and landscaping in every 30 feet. They would have a fence on the north end of the property. Their original design had a bank of townhomes here, but based on conversations with this neighbor to the north, they changed that to single or a twin home style, which twin homes, also for the good of the audience to know, twin homes are actually an allowed use in all of our residential zones. So that is something that even if this were to be zoned single-family residential would be allowed. We have some patio homes, some single-family type style homes, and some twin homes. Now this is the building that I called out a minute ago that is 2-story building. There is this residential home that exists on Flint Street, and so they wanted to be sensitive to that existing property. And so instead of the 3-story building as these others are, this is a 2-story building with what they're calling live-work units. So that's, a great opportunity for someone who may be a graphic designer and want to have an office space, but not necessarily want to commute because, they could do everything from home, but they just want to have a dedicated space. It could also be a live-work maybe for a salon, somebody who's a stylist, an attorney that might just be a standalone attorney or a tax accountant. So those are some of the uses we might anticipate in a live-work type of a scenario. So again, these are the other 4 buildings that they proposed with the ground floor commercial and then the 2 stories of apartments. over the top of those. And so this area here would be the parcel that they're proposing to be the true RM mixed-use overlay. One of the things that, again, is a main goal with a mixed-use project is to have it be very pedestrian-friendly, pedestrian-oriented. You'll see here that the buildings are pulled out closer to the street, the parking is tucked behind. So as you see this from the streetscape, there's a pleasantness associated with it, that if I want to walk into a business here, I'm not going to have to walk across a sea of 400 parking stalls to get in there. And again, having the connectivity and the walking path throughout the entire unit would make it really easy for somebody to just run over, grab dinner from one of the restaurants that are over there and walk back. Might not make sense to use your meal delivery, I'm blanking on that, but you're not going to use your DoorDash when you can just walk across the parking lot, I would hope anyway. So the project also has here on the south side of the parcel, closer to Smith's, this is where they're putting the more dense units, the bank of townhomes. None of the townhomes are a bank of more than 6 units, so that really breaks things up and helps with the massing of a project to not feel as overwhelming. And then I think they have also tried to make some concessions with moving things around the project to try and have sight lines that are preserved for the existing neighbors to the north. And then again, this is where the little play area would be for the development. Let me go on to this next slide. So we received to date 7 emails. I checked right before we came in, and 4 of those offered kind of, I think, some strong support for the project. By the way, we mailed out 62 notices. Our city code requires that we mail notices on a rezone change to all the properties within 500 feet of the subject property. So we mailed out 62 notices. And I wanted to make sure those went out in plenty of time with the holidays and all that, so they went out the day before Thanksgiving. And that's generally where we get a lot of our emailed comments is coming from those. The other 3 comments that came in, and also the audience should know that when you go to our website and fill out the form and hit submit, those emails are automatically sent out to every single one of our planning commissioners. So they've had them from the minute you sent submit. And then I include all of those comments that we received in the packet that I forward to the city council so that they're aware of all the comments that we've received as well. So the concerns that we've heard through those emails, density, traffic, parking, road widths, the buffering, we addressed that just a little bit. Some were feeling that the compatibility of the uses still wasn't, I guess, it wasn't as compatible as they wanted it to see, and there was some concern about emergency vehicle access. Throughout the last, I don't know, probably 6 months that I've been talking with the project team, we've gone through a variety of questions and what ifs. One of those was, what about connecting the road? Would that create any detrimental impacts? And so talking about traffic, we did have the applicant get a traffic study that was included in the public or in the packet. A lot of times the citizens may think that a traffic study would come back and say, do a project or don't do a project. And that's just not how they work. The traffic impact study would come back and say, here's the impact of the project, and if required, here's some mitigation measures. This is probably going to be surprising to some, but the nature of this project with the existing traffic on Flint Street really was negligible. So there were no mitigation measures that were proposed. Yes, Flint is a busy street. Yes, there are some crowded times during, especially the peak times, but all in all, the traffic study came back and said that this really was not a meaningful impact on the road. I did have our city engineer and our public works director review the traffic study, and neither one of them had any recommendations on mitigation measures or any concerns with this project going in. Another question that had come up during discussions was whether or not there would be a traffic signal that would be added at Flint and Flint Meadow Drive. And the city does not have plans at this point in time to put a traffic signal in there. We do have what we call it's essentially our master street plan or our traffic and transportation plan, and there are not any signalized plans for that intersection. There were some concerns too of the neighborhood, thinking that those in this new development might drive up and through their neighborhood. I suppose that is plausible, but I think most people will head directly east and just go right out to Flint. The traffic report also stated that if anything, the new development would have more pass-through traffic from the existing residents than vice versa. I'm trying to think of anything else. There had been some questions about could that road be gated off, and simply said no. Our public safety just doesn't work very well when you have gated access. And so the fire chief is the one who ultimately makes a decision on whether or not that would be a possibility. And his answer has come back and said, thanks for asking, but no. And that's exactly how Chief Erickson is, if you've ever met him. It's great. Yep, you know exactly where he stands. It's great. Trying to think if there's anything else that I should cover. May come up as we have a little bit more discussion after the public comment period. Another thing that I did want to point out then, so the recommendation is to approve the rezone request as has been presented and with the development agreement that's within the packet. If you have not had a chance yet to read the opinion that Brent Bateman sent back on the appeal that we just had on the conditional use permit, one of the things that he mentioned was there were no findings listed in the motion, and it would have been nice for him to have had those findings to look back on with the appeal. So one of the things that, as I've transitioned here with my time, I've wanted to get the Planning Commission and hopefully the council in the habit of having findings, which essentially is, here's the reasons why we're making this decision. And so traditionally, staff have presented those findings as a ready way for you to either agree or disagree or even add on more findings. So in general, the findings that I've included in here are that that top bullet is not a finding. But the guiding principle of the 2022 plan supports this rezone request. We have goals and objectives in chapter 1, 2, and 3 that also support the rezone request. And we would be able to report back to the state in 2023 some positive progress towards our modern income housing requirements. And I think that the way the project has also been designed, it has mitigated, I think, to the extent that they possibly can, impacting the character of the neighborhood to the north, while considering that really harsh, incompatible use of a family, a single family living right next to, Smith's Marketplace, the back end of Smith's Marketplace. The project was also diversify some of the available housing project in Kaysville and provide for full life cycle housing, actually even within the development. I mean, you could go from an apartment to, you know, a townhome to a patio home, all within the same development. It also connects or enhances regional connectivity with the trails and neighborhood access. And the traffic, there's no profound impact to the traffic as well. And so also the purposes of the RM and the mixed use zone are supported by this project. So that is what I had for you, the commission, this evening. I should also say to the public that, you know, really we're here tonight because somebody paid a fee and put an application in, and by law we are required to process that application. Along with that allows the applicant an opportunity to directly address the commission and for them to, you know, provide further input on the project that they're presenting. So that's all I have. If there's any questions, I can answer those for you now, or again, the applicant's here for you to hear from as well.
Thank you for your report. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Not yet.
Okay, not yet. Any questions over here? Okay, well, we'll have the applicant step up to the podium and address us. If you'll state your name, please, when you come to the podium.
Good evening, and thank you for spending your time here tonight. We know you guys don't get thanked a lot, and we really, really appreciate it. My name's Greg Nelson, and I'm a resident of Kaysville. I live in the south end of West Kaysville, and we're partnered, my company, Millstream Partners, is partnered with John and Shauna Flynn and their family to try and figure out what to do with one of these kind of last iconic pieces of West Kaysville property that sits at the middle of a lot of things happening. So John's going to stand up here in a minute and give you some context. Melinda did a great job sort of giving you an overview. Some of our slides are duplicative, and in the interest of time, I'll skip over those. So just know if I skip over it, it's because Melinda just did a great job kind of summarizing it. So thank you again for your time and service. We are excited about this piece of property. Again, as a Kaysville resident, I'm sensitive to why I live in Kaysville, why you live in Kaysville, why sort of everybody in this room lives in Kaysville, and want to do something that I can be proud of in a long time, because I don't plan on moving anytime soon, and I hope someday when my kids or grandkids show up and say, Dad, who built that thing, that I can say, well, the Flints and I figured that out, and we're excited about that. Melinda, do the next slide. Is the best way to just ask you to transition? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Just keep going? Okay, amazing. Obviously, this is near the north border of the city. It's right by John and Shauna's home. And so I think one thing to note is John and Shauna live kind of right across the street. And I've got a pointer if you're looking up at this one. They kind of live right in here, right there. And so this is obviously something they're going to live with as well for quite a while. I think you're all familiar with the piece of property. I had one member of city government say to me, yeah, I drive past that all the time and just wonder, what should we do there? What on earth should we do there? And we're pretty excited about this. So with that, Melinda, if you go to the next slide, I'm going to let John stand up and give you some context as to how we got here and why this piece of property is coming forward sort of right now in a high interest rate, sort of unstable macroeconomic environment.
Good evening. Thank you. I'll echo what Greg said. I look at each one of you. I don't know many of you, but I look at you and I think, I bet they'd rather be home, getting ready for Christmas or some things. And boy, I admire your dedication. I really do. We appreciate all that you do, the sacrifices that you make, and for the betterment of Kaysville. We love Kaysville, and I know you do as well. But I do wish to thank you. I want to thank staff, city. Melinda has been sensational. You have been so cordial and so helpful in so many things. We've had lots of meetings. Dan also has been there. And as well. We appreciate all the support that you've given. The people behind me, there's some great people and great friends, great neighbors, and I have much respect for them. This go-around has been much smoother, and we appreciate their patience and all their support, the respect that they've shown throughout. We've had 4 meetings at our home on this project. We met with them before anything was decided or got input from them, and we've had 3 additional meetings since. So it's been a good experience, and the majority, the emotions have all been sensational. Millstream, Greg, you've already probably picked this up, but I promise you by the end, you'll think very, very highly of this man. We've had a lot of people come to us in the last year and a half with all kinds of proposals and all kinds of ideas. And we immediately, on the first meeting with him, knew there was something special. And the partners that he's affiliated with, tremendous integrity, honesty, great communication has just been constant all the way through. And we as the owners of the property, we couldn't ask. And I hope he has more opportunities with the city, because he brings some real class. And I really appreciate him. My family, most of them are here behind me, and I appreciate them and their support. They also all live here in Kaysville. They love this place, and it means a lot to them. They've had a great history. Just real quick, a little bit about this property. I don't want to take too long. I know these carry on, but our family came here in 1851. We've had Flint Farms for 171 years. And I'm having to close the door. And it's hard. It's an emotional time. I walked out on that field today, and I looked and thought many, many experiences that took place. And we've always tried in our decisions to support Kaysville, to betterment Kaysville, and to help any way we could. And there's been a lot of things that we've been affiliated with, and I'm not using this as a platform to boast or to brag. It's just to show you genuine care. We've supported and really helped, I think, with 2 parks. Our property was down on Angel Street with the soccer complex, and Barnes Park. We were very, very close with Emily Barnes and sort of worked together on that, and paid tribute to that family with the 3 boys that she lost in that tragedy of the train wreck. We got together with summer markets of the Gabler family, and we, with the city, established the business park. And we feel like that's a real asset, a real credit. And of course, the Smiths, that was a tough day, and we've got through that. But I think now that was something that has really helped the west side, and has been very, very good, and gives a lot of benefit to a lot of people. When we first got this property, my grandpa's brother actually owned it, other than the very west side, Trilla Schofield did, and they came to us. The city did when the city started to really build, and right there where Annie's restaurant is, right across from the mortuary, that's where the public works were. And they came to us and they said, we would like to move our public works on the second floor from Flint Street. And there hasn't been many times that we've turned the city down or opposed to it, but we just didn't feel that was the best use. And we declined on that, and sort of talked to him about Larkin's property over there by the mill, and that's where it ended up. But that was the first thing. And then to speed things up, the time went along, and the Smiths project came in, and that changed hands a little bit, back and forth, and we had to make a decision. And I think Greg will show you the outline there in the red, that's on the screen. But that was the proposed project, was that entire area that's highlighted there with the red. The store was going to be moved to the north my house was going to be removed, which was on the west side where we raised our family for 40 years. And the entrance, the wall was going to be up along where the neighbors were, and then that was going to be a lot further north so that more pods could be set up, more businesses there to help the infrastructure, help the city with the tax base. But we had a hard decision with that, and I'm probably the one that was responsible because I had a father that was awful special, and he had farmed for many, many years. And he still, I felt like, had some significant time, and so we asked the city if we could put that right on the south of our house and go straight across to the Overs property and go that way, and then we knew that that was going to maybe close some doors as far as for the businesses. But we thought that we could probably maybe have some other opportunities down the road. But it enabled him to still have some horses to feed, do a little hay, and live another good 10 years because this was the remaining property that we had on our farm. And so that was sort of the decision that was made. Since then, we've made some adjustments, but now is the time that we feel like this project is something that is really good. We know it's new. We know this direction is something new. But I promise you that as a family, we feel very, very good about it and the potential that is there. So I will close with that. And I again thank you so much for all that you do in your time.
I think we're all fortunate to be blessed to live in Kaysville, in part because of what the Flint family's done for 175 years. That's a long time. So thank you to the Flint family. I want to reiterate what John said about this being a good experience with neighbors, whether we agree or disagree. Some way into this, I heard some stories about what happened when the Smith's development was being proposed and considered, and I heard about some of the Flint's property trying to be burned down by people that disagreed, some lug nuts on tires being loosened, and thankfully nobody died. And I thought, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? Maybe we ought to reconsider being involved here. This has been absolutely not that. It's been a great process. You're going to hear from people tonight that agree. You're going to hear from people that disagree. But we want to emphasize that, generally speaking, this has been very respectful. So thank you to those that are here, whether you agree or disagree, for voicing your opinion in a respectful way for the most part. That's been wonderful, and I believe as a city, we can engage in dialogue in a respectful way, and there have been some other processes with other pieces of ground in our city that maybe haven't gone that way, and this one has been good, and that's a blessing. So we're grateful that that's the case. Linda, will you go to the next slide? We're going to move along here a little bit quicker, but generally speaking, we looked at this as a project team, and we said, okay, you've got competing uses. How do we design something that somehow transitions? This was supposed to be a Smith's that backs all the way up against the north. Well, it's not, because John wanted his dad to farm that piece of property until he passed away. So we have a special opportunity, and that opportunity is to do something that blends aspects of what surrounds it. So obviously to the north and the west, as has been discussed, you have residential uses, traditional West Kaysville single-family uses, and you can see it right there in Flint Court and Pleasant View Drive. It sort of dead ends there into that north side of the property. Next slide, Melinda. Obviously, you have the Smith's development to the south, which is retail, commercial. I know it's zone light industrial. The use is commercial. I know there were a lot of people with heartburn over that. I think all of us have gotten pizza or yogurt or been to Smith's now, and can you imagine West Kaysville without that for just a sec? That would be a little different. Probably not good. Next slide, Melinda. And then you have sort of this mix along the Flint Street frontage. Melinda mentioned it. It's notable to us that in the future land use maps that was designated as a spot to consider mixed use. We believe it'll likely go that way. We know the Lightbox Dance Studio was recently sold to a business that anticipates trying to do some office and manufacturing activity there. So you sort of have a hodgepodge of uses there. You've got Egan Automotive next door to Green Construction, next door to John and Shauna, next door to Dance. I mean, it's a unique place. And then behind that, Barnes Drive, obviously. So when we looked at the map as a project team, we said, how do we take that smorgasbord of color and how do we pull various aspects of that into that spot in the middle? Is there a way to do that? Melinda, next slide. Other pieces of ground in Kaysville have tried to do it other ways. We believe that each piece of property is unique. So what may have made sense on this piece of property may not make sense on our piece of property. I think there are probably moments when that single-family home is more or less happy with what's going on there. We felt like this transition was maybe a little abrupt, but it might have been right for that property. We asked the question, what's right for ours? Next slide, Melinda. I think one of the blessings of what we're trying to propose is that the construction of what we would develop will be less sort of heavy and abrupt than maybe what is happening in other parts of our city. And as you get into our plan and really look at it, we think it provides a pretty ideal transition between all these competing uses while accomplishing some of the aspects of the general plan that Melinda noted. Next slide, Melinda. What we're proposing is RM. Again, that pulls that yellow from the north and the west into what we're doing, residential. And the next slide, Melinda. Mixed-use overlay sort of pulls from the east and the south. So you sort of have all four sides of a compass getting pulled into this thing in the middle that incorporates all pieces. Next slide, Melinda. I think context-wise, it's important for you to know what we were trying to accomplish when we started. I think the first question we had was, what is the highest and best use for this piece of property generally? And the second piece of that was, how do we do that in a way that doesn't basically allow one of the four stakeholder groups here to sort of commandeer the process and get everything they want without the other stakeholder groups getting anything they want? There are really four stakeholder groups here. There's the Flint family as the property owner. There's the surrounding neighborhood, the city, and then there's the people that are going to live here in the future. And somehow we've got to balance all four of those. And so one of our project goals as a team, the Flint family and our Millstream team, is how do we create cooperative compromise between all four of those groups in a way that probably nobody gets exactly what they want, but they all compromise into something that's a really nice development for the future of the city. That was a goal. Obviously transition, which we've talked about. We really wanted to provide some housing for those in what we call the dumbbell stages of life. Kind of got this first, kind of the left side of the dumbbell, which is us sort of self-interestedly trying to provide some housing for our kids that are newly married and maybe have one child that have grown up in Kaysville and said, man, really like this place. In our home, we call Kaysville Saturday Town. It's like the greatest Saturday town ever. It's the great 4th of July town, and they love it. And they would like to live here if they can when they get their first job out of college and they're in that first CPA job and they want to live in Kaysville, but they can't go buy a $700,000 house. Whatever it is, right? I mean, they can't afford a lot of homes in Kaysville. And they are also not in a stage where they want to go put something down for 7 years. They're probably in a first job or being able to go into a townhome or a small patio home or a 2-bedroom apartment for 2 years while they save money to buy their first Kaysville house is possible. We don't really provide much of that for people on that kind of early stage of their life in Kaysville. On the other end of the dumbbell is people, kind of like my mom. My mom has lived in this community since I was 8. She still lives here. She lives in a big 4,800 square foot home. My dad passed away unexpectedly, and she's given to this community for 40 years, and I'm worried that we're going to get to a spot here in a few years where she can't take care of her big yard, she's all alone in her big house, and then we're going to say, go to Layton. And we're so happy that you were here for so long and did such a great job, but we're really not that interested in providing you many options to stay here in this stage of your life. And as a project team, we wanted to try and address that in a real way. Some of our other goals, honoring the Flint family legacy with something that would economically pencil and allow us to provide quality for the long term. Density is a funny word. We'll talk about it in a minute. People like to talk about density in a vacuum. But density has to be balanced with things like quality. It has to be balanced with things like the ability to maintain it long term so that it's something you're really proud of that can be upkept. And one of our goals was to honor the Flint family legacy, because this isn't something they plan on just doing and getting out of real quick. This is something, as hopefully everybody knows by now, when the Flints do something, they want to do it well. They want to do it with a legacy, and that's a goal. And then we wanted to help the city accomplish some of the policy objectives of the general plan. and maintain good standing with the state with all the issues going on there that you're well aware of. So those were the goals. That's what we were trying to accomplish. We'll end the next slide. We started as a base with green space, and we said, look, right now everybody loves looking at the green field in the spring, right, when it kind of late spring turns green, and everybody's like, man, I wish Kaysville could be that forever. Well, so let's start there. And then let's try and fill in a way that keeps kind of the spirit of what this is, which is a nice open space with connectivity. And I'm going to point out in a few slides some of the specific things we did to address dialogue with neighbors in the city and others, but we wanted to start with a kind of a green base and say, this feels nice, now how do we add to it? Next slide. So we decided that it was most appropriate to pull the single family aspects from the north and the west into the border. So that's why those are patio homes, because it looks and feels to us like what's happening around it. And so we feel like that is good, appropriate, responsible transition. There's 16 units there. We'll talk in a minute about some of the things we did there, and Melinda mentioned some of them to be thoughtful. Again, we want it to look and feel like West Kaysville. No, that's fine, Melinda. Next one. I mean, this is an artist rendition, right? And we want it to look and feel like this, though, where there's walkability, there's landscaping, there's things that really make sense and make it feel like a quality addition to our community. Next slide, Melinda. The townhomes were really done with a couple of important things in mind. I think number one, we wanted to do it in smaller blocks because we wanted to break this up to maintain our base. Our base was that sort of green, nice thing feeling with all the connectivity. So if we did nice townhomes in little blocks, it maintained that feel. There are a lot of ways we could build single-family homes that are super tight together that would not feel like this. And so what we didn't want to do is sacrifice the feel of openness, the feel of sight lines, the feel of providing walkways and a park and things in the name only of single family. And so that was the purpose behind the townhomes. The townhomes will be nice townhomes, 1,500 to 1,750 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, sort of an idea. That some of this stems from personal experience. When we built a home in Kaysville, we had to rent a place while we were building, and we had to go to Farmington. And we stayed in a 1,700 square foot townhome, 5 kids. It was a party. But we were kind of bugged that we had to go farther away to find something like that. And so in terms of size and quality, this is something the development team has direct experience with, we're concerned about. These will be nice. And they are designed in clusters so that it can maintain open feel, maintain a community feel. Next slide, Melinda. That kind of gives you a sense for where the park is, right? One thing to notice that I think is important, we'll talk about it in a minute, but the street design shows a couple of spots where it kind of pinches and the sidewalk kind of comes in. That was done intentionally to try and reduce speed. We are concerned about speed along this street. We're concerned about the speed of people driving from the existing neighborhood into this and vice versa, right? No matter where they drive, we're concerned about speed. So we've tried to design this in a way that kind of reduces that, helps people slow down and promotes walkability and connectivity. Next slide, Melinda. Mixed use portion along the front. Again, designed so that all the stakeholders could get some of what they wanted, one of which is the city. And there aren't a lot of places left that are just sort of open along some of our busier roads. Those are probably rare these days in a city that's developing out. So in sort of a nod to one of the stakeholders, which is the city, we tried to design this in a way that provided ground floor rentable commercial space. That is not in the best interest of the development team or the landowner. That is more expensive space to deal with because it has turnover and we have to redo that thing and provide tenant improvement allowances and things like that. We would be better off if that was all residential, but we feel like this is one of those compromises where everybody has to give a little in order for everybody to get a little bit of what they want. So that's why that kind of went that way. Height allowances per city code would allow for those 4 buildings to the south of the road, kind of these 4 right here, to be 35 feet in height. What that allows us to do is sort of provide nice apartments. We anticipate these will be at least 9-foot ceilings, if not 10. So it'll feel good while still staying plenty within kind of the allowed height by code and not getting too tall. On a future slide, we'll talk a little more about those live work units and how that kind of came to be. Next slide, Melinda. That gives you, again, kind of an artist rendition, 3-story idea. Like Melinda said, the idea was towards the front there's a lot of walkability. As opposed to having parking on the front, we wanted there to be trees and walkability and have that feel very approachable. There's some park benches, things like that, where someone could sit down and kind of be there and live in Kaysville instead of just having it be a parking lot. So, next slide. Linda, we can skip past all these. You hit them all, but there's a lot of aspects of the general plan that this hits on that we think are important. We've tried to be very thoughtful in reviewing the general plan and doing things that help the city accomplish its goals. Let's see, you can even go one more. I think you hit all those. A couple of things to note on this slide. This site we think is ideal for providing housing diversity within our city for some really practical reasons that don't always get hit on, but that are really, really important. I think number one, the sewage for this development would drain to the east, to Flint Street, where that pipe is. That pipe still has the ability to do that. If we proposed this development farther west and we were draining onto Angel Street, this would be a lot more complicated. Because there's just not, there's the practicality of where do you have capacity to try and achieve some of the goals the city has set out. And you can't just plop that down anywhere you want because there are practical concerns with infrastructure. And we believe this, this proposed development would not cause any big issues with infrastructure, and that the city does have infrastructure to do something like this here. And other places it doesn't. And so I think that's a real practical consideration. Overall, we reduce water usage substantially by doing this. Alfalfa, as we all know and read in the paper every day, takes a lot of water. And John has a 3-inch line that puts a lot of water out there. So overall, this helps there. Now, whatever you do there, it's going to be a reduction in water. That's not unique to what we've proposed. But it is something that would allow us as a city to kind of get net positive a little bit more in that regard. There is a big added safety benefit. Right now, there's only one ingress and egress into the neighborhood to the north. That's at Flint Meadows Drive. This would give 2. The fire chief was very happy about that. Pleasant View Drive dead ends into this property. Sort of was always contemplated that that would somehow go through and connect to Flint Street. We believe we've done so in a way that allows for transition. You know, that road could go through there a lot of ways. We designed it to sort of come out onto Flint Street across from the Lightbox Dance Studio because we wanted it to come out across from something that would be mixed use or commercial in nature and not across from one of the existing single-family homes, so that was intentional. The other important thing to note is that Pleasant View Drive ingress egress would allow people to do a left-hand turn to go north on Flint, which is really hard to do in busy times, in a spot where there's a median lane they can turn into. Farther to the north, where the current neighborhood turns out of, there is no median lane. So you got to kind of get right out and into traffic as opposed to going out into a median and then merging. So we believe, and the traffic study supports the idea that the new Pleasant View Drive ingress egress would be superior and safer and just frankly take less time than what is currently there. And we think that's a net positive. Overall, there's just relatively few opportunities left in our city, we believe, to do something like this. There's not a lot. We are building out, we're growing. We're not getting younger. One thing the general plan talks about is how we are getting older. 2 years ago in 2019, I think the average age of the city was about 27.1 or something. Average age today, just 3 years later, is 30. Our kindergarten classes are getting smaller, not larger. And this promotes some of that diversity necessary to keep our city vibrant that we just really don't have a lot of. Next slide, Melinda. We don't need to go over this in detail, but again, we accomplished our project team goals with this design. Notably, the zoning would allow 71 units. We don't want to go there because we don't think it's right for Kaysville. There is a density that doesn't make sense for Kaysville, we think. And so we've pulled back from what the code would allow because we're trying to find that right feel while still being able to economically build something in a way that pencils. Melinda, you can go to the next slide. And we talked about the dumbbell ages of life and all that kind of stuff. So you can keep going, Melinda. Just to give you an idea of how much we've tried to engage with neighbors and solicit input. We met first with neighbors on May 16th of this year. There's some pictures there of John and Sean are very kind, so if you ever need any treats, we'll let you know when a neighbor meeting's going to be, and there's going to be extra, and you can stop by and get some. Great meeting, great input. Again, we appreciate how respectful it has generally been with neighbors and their willingness to engage. This first meeting, you can see that we just had some big notepads right there. We had our architect at the meeting listening, and we asked the question, what concerns do you have? What worries you as we contemplate developing this land? And then we listened and we wrote things down. That was important to us. The people invited to that were the people directly adjacent to the property along the north and then to the west of the rail trail. We didn't want to get too big of a group because then it kind of becomes unwieldy. So that was our first meeting. We then sent our architect to the drawing board and we said, listen, you just heard everything we heard. So can you take those concerns? Can you marry them with the realities of construction costs and other things? And can you marry those together and let's see what we can do? So we spent the time between May and August trying to do that, refining it, trying to get the right balance. We then met again with that same group on August 17th and showed them what we did. And then we listened again. Later that night, we met with a broader radius of people, anybody within 500 feet, and they came. We showed them kind of where we'd gotten based on initial neighbor feedback, and then we heard their concerns. That's primarily where we heard the density concern. That's where we heard the concern about traffic going through their neighborhood to a stoplight. And so we said, okay, we'll go to work. We'll work with the city and find out, is there really going to be a stoplight there? If there is, boy, we see your concern, and people probably will go through there. If there's not, as it turns out, likely to be one, we have the opposite concern, because that new Pleasant View Drive is probably going to be a little better place to turn out of. And so we went to work, and then we tried to put it all together. Since August, we've had numerous phone calls, emails, visits to homes. I've sat at kitchen tables and looked at sight lines. We've tried our very best to engage and to listen and be respectful and to be responsive. We've also tried to be transparent and honest. We've tried to let people know, you know what, there are spots where we just disagree, and that's okay. There are also spots where financially, that doesn't work. And so we really feel like we've done the best job we can of engaging with neighbors in a way that is maybe not normal with developers when they try and do different projects. Linda, if you go to the next slide. In response to all that, I want to talk about some things that were deliberate. There's a lot of arrows and circles on this, so forgive me, but it hopefully gives you a sense of what we tried to do. So I want to stop in the top right. So I've got a little pointer here. In the top right, these live-work units. That was really deliberate. Again, better for us economically if we take one of the buildings in the mixed-use zone on the south and just repeat it up there on that north. But we were concerned about transitioning from the single-family home along Flint into what we're doing. So we decided, well, if that's 2 stories, then as you're sort of walking or driving from north to south, you've got 1-story residential. And if we only made that 2 stories, then we would only go up 1 floor, which you could do with a house anyways. So the fact that it's a live-work unit doesn't make it any taller than it would be if it was another single-family home. So then you kind of have a gradual step up to 2. Then you have that break in the new Pleasant View Drive connection. And then you go up to 3. So there's a very gradual transition up, and that's an intentional design element. We believe 4 live-work units in our city probably makes some sense. 4 is not a lot, but it is something. And we think there are some of our children that are going to college right now that may want to open a graphic design business or a photography studio, or may want to open up a small law firm or something like that. They'd be pretty happy to be there for the first few years. This circle right here, there's kind of 2 circles in the middle of the road, just highlighting again those pinch points where hopefully that slows traffic down a bit. Those roads are, just so you know, curb to curb, 33 feet. That is sufficient width to have cars parked along one side and for 2 lanes of traffic to go. I know there's been some questions about road width. Those are the code. They're 33 feet wide. So we can all go drive city streets and you can get a feel for that, and I know you know what that's like. Behind the single-family patio homes, there's a really big, long circle. The reason that's there is we wanted you to know that path right there that goes all behind the homes, that's not inexpensive. We believe it's a wonderful thing. It provides buffer for the single-family neighborhood to the north. It also provides some buffer for the patio homes, provides spaces for trees, and it sort of creates, again, transition, but with a little bit of a buffer, as opposed to if we built single-family homes in a dense way, we think this is a better plan than cramming those single-family two-story homes up there against the fence and tightly packing them in. We think this is nicer. We understand others may disagree, and that's okay. We just think this provides a really nice feel. It is an expense. It's something that we can only do if we hit sort of a certain density level. That's the give and take. You'll see up here at the north, there's a little circle. That little circle is where we connect in to the existing neighborhood. That was something that was requested at our initial meeting. They wanted to be able to connect in here. And then they somehow wanted to connect into the existing rail trail. Right now there's a chain link fence right here at Pleasant View Drive. Chain link fence is sort of bent over like this because people will climb over that chain link fence to get into the rail trail. This way there's an actual connection with a sidewalk where they can walk, cross over right here, come in and connect to the rail trail. In addition, we pulled that rail trail connection down by Smith's as opposed to connecting it up here. This single family home right here, it's already bordered by the rail trail right here. So we didn't want to have our trail go there so that they were bordered on two sides by people walking. So we pulled it down here to Smith's where it now connects. You can see there's a park with the townhomes, again, promoting open space. All of these lines, these double arrowed lines, it's intended to highlight something that we did intentionally, which was sight lines. Again, we really believe sight lines matter. It promotes a feeling of openness. It promotes a feeling of we live in a balanced community. We've oriented this in a way that the sight lines exist. There were some neighbors down here to the west, very concerned about their sight lines to some development happening up here in Layton. We've tried to pull things this way to where there's a corridor there. We've done the best that we can there. These twin homes Melinda mentioned, they were originally townhomes. We changed them to 2 twin homes. We did that really in response to some concerns to of the neighbors adjacent. The other thing we did, those twin homes are not set back here. We pulled them up towards the street as opposed to having them there so that it would more appropriately line up with this house and not kind of be in their backyard, if you will. There's a big long square right here. That represents a fence that's in the development agreement. We've proposed to line this whole thing with a white vinyl fence. That is not a small fence. That will be an expensive fence. We think it'll be a benefit to the neighbors. Right now it's chain link. And we think that'll provide a really nice buffer in addition to the other things that we're doing. So again, not everybody got what they want. I recognize that there are going to be some concerns with this plan and other ways to do it. We do feel like this balances the 4 stakeholders in a way that causes compromise in a really nice way. And these are sort of some of the ways we've tried to be responsive to neighbor feedback. Next slide, Melinda. In terms of traffic study, Melinda mentioned it. I do want to say one thing about the traffic study, just so that you're aware. Hales Engineering provided the traffic study. It was done in accordance with professional standards that you all know about, and it's in there. What you might not know and want to point out, they assumed a per-day trip rate for each of our units of 16. That's high.
That's way high.
That's way high. We
That's
did
more
that
than
in
double.
10.
That's more than double.
It's a lot. It is. We thought it was about double.
Yeah, it is.
We did that intentionally. That was a decision the development team made. We didn't want anybody to look at our traffic study and say, hey, you tried to skimp. So we did about double. Even at double, which we believe is a worst possible case scenario for something next to a Smith's and things, that's the impact and no mitigation measures were recommended. So we feel like this is appropriately conservative, and we've tried to be blatantly unbiased in doing that study, and that's hard to do when you write a check that big for a study. But
Yeah,
it was
they're not cheap.
They're not cheap, but it was the right thing to do. And in the spirit of honoring the Flint family legacy, it was the right thing to do, which is how the Flints handle themselves and how we are trying to respect this process. Next slide, Melinda. I pointed some of this out earlier. I think we've talked about this, how this becomes, we believe, a safer egress because of the median lane that exists right here you can turn into if you're turning north. We believe more than likely there is traffic that's going to come out of the existing neighborhood and go this way. I know some of the neighbors are concerned that there will nonetheless be a lot of traffic from here going the other way. We just agree to disagree. We don't really see why someone would do that. In 2027, Hales Engineering estimated this to be the average wait times at the various intersections. You can see there's a lot of advantage to using that one. And so we think that's what the data says. We tend to agree with it. So again, views different ways, and that's okay, especially because they've been respectful, and we're grateful for that. But that's what the traffic study said. Next slide, Melinda. Actually, you can do the next slide. We've talked about the density decrease. We do want to just note that a 25-unit reduction in the RM zone from the 71 that would be allowed, that's a 35% pullback in density from what the code allows. That's not insignificant. We have had other people in our profession tell us that that might be unwise and that we're leaving a lot of money on the table, and I appreciate that view. Again, one of the first project goals was recognize that there are 4 stakeholders, try and get all 4 stakeholders to compromise. And so we do note that the Flint family has pulled back 35% on the density that would be allowed in order to address some of the neighbors' density concerns. Some are going to tell you tonight we haven't gone far enough. I respect that that's their view. On the next slide, Melinda, or actually this slide, sorry, keep it here. If we reduce density further, I think it's important to note some of the things that happen, not because anybody's trying to be a bad actor, but because of the realities of math. If you address density in a vacuum, then issues become things like, okay, if we reduce density, then the homes that go there are going to be significantly more expensive, because that's how the math works. The issue of marketability of those homes is something that becomes pertinent to the city. I'm not interested in buying a larger home that's expensive and listening to the Smiths guys unload chicken at 3 in the morning with blinking lights in my backyard. That's just not realistic. And I don't think that's what we really want. The other thing, if you don't go that way, if the houses don't become much more expensive and you reduce density, then either the houses become much less lower quality or the uses have to change, because it just doesn't pencil. And so, again, if you talk about, well, we think that there should be less density there, we understand that's the view, but that can't be the view in a vacuum without considering what that means for either the quality or the type of things you do on a piece of land that sits in the middle of all of these competing uses. Amenities are lost, potentially. That's another thing you can do. You can say, okay, look, let's reduce density some, but okay, we got to take the trail out because it doesn't pencil. Or we can't connect to the rail trail because it doesn't pencil. Or we can't provide a park, doesn't pencil. We can't do everything everyone wants and then just reduce density to an area that one of the stakeholder groups believes is appropriate. Not because we don't want to, not because we don't want to try, but because the math doesn't work. And so we're trying to find that place where the density allows the amenities, it allows the quality, it allows the price points for those people on the dumbbell ends of life. And the Flints have still pulled back 35%, and there is some give there too, because that's important for everybody to compromise. Next slide, Melinda. Just want to end. One of the emails that you received was from an individual that lives in the neighborhood directly north on the larger single-family lots, and they said it better than we could, so we just want to quote their letter in case you haven't had a chance to read it. They said, quote, "I have seen a great deal of change in Kaysville since my family first moved here. Many of us may wish that our community could remain exactly as it was when we first chose to make this our home. However, if that were the case, there would not be room for our children and grandchildren. I commend you for your efforts to address the needs of Kaysville City by providing a variety of housing types that will meet the needs of growing families and others who may be at different stages of their life. As we look at how to meet the need, I appreciate that you are making this possible by distributing these possibilities throughout the community. This is clearly preferable to attempts made by some communities to concentrate all of this type of housing into one specific area, often on the fringes of the community. Neighborhoods with a diverse makeup clearly enhance our quality of life. Next slide. They then finish by saying, based on my understanding of the proposed development, I support the proposed rezone, and the reasons being the proposed development meets a need that this neighbor to the north believes exists in our community. The proposed development provides an appropriate transition from the low-density residential development to the north, their neighborhood, and the commercial development to the south. The proposed development will provide a much-needed second access to their neighborhood, increasing safety and emergency access, egress. And the development includes important elements that increases connectivity to adjacent amenities, including the rail trail and Barnes Park, unquote. You know, in the general plan, it says, specifically mixed use should be located in a place in our city that's sort of at the middle of live, work, and play options. I can't think of many pieces of vacant ground in our city that are more in the middle of live, work, and play. We literally have Barnes Park, where we work and play, right across the street, and we are proposing connectivity to that in a way that is really what the city envisioned for mixed use. We really believe this is what the highest and best use of the property is. We recognize that some disagree with the density. We are so grateful for the respect that it generally has been shown during the process. If there's anything to celebrate tonight, I think it's probably that, because that doesn't always happen, and that's a beautiful thing. We live in a community where that should always happen, and there are really good people here. We would request respectfully that you would approve this rezone application so that we can go build that in our community and support people that are growing up here now and people that have lived here for 40 years and allow them to stay in the community that they love. And we thank you for your time.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant before he sits down?
Just quickly, what do you see as your absorption timeframe, and then timeframe from approval to being able to start and finish?
Yeah, great question. Absorption right now for townhomes in the state can be anywhere from 10 to 20 units a month, depending on the development. There are some in the apartment section. We just leased up similar apartments, and we were leasing at about 25 per month. We don't anticipate those will last longer than about 45 days once they're available, if that. And so it's going to be quick, just because there's not a lot of options. So I think we don't anticipate it will take very long at all for any of those units. We have had, interestingly enough, we have had people from the surrounding neighborhoods approach us to get their name on a wait list for the patio homes. So we have not started the wait list yet, and I'm a little bit concerned about how we do that fairly. So I don't anticipate absorption to be a problem at all. In terms of improvement, once we get permits, it'll go quickly. Because of the way it's designed, we're able to construct in pods and then get leasing going. That's preferable in the current environment because of interest rates, and we would obviously do so in conjunction with city staff to make sure safety is maintained. But to build one of those pods of townhomes, once we put a shovel in the ground, I think within 9 months to 12 months, we have those ready to go.
On your townhomes, what's your square footage total on those?
Yeah, we expect square footage, depending on where you are in there, to be 1,500 to 1,750 square feet.
Okay, and that's just slab on grade?
Yeah, slab on grade. Great questions.
It seems to be from emails, there are a lot of questions about patio homes. So could you expand a little bit? So was that definitive what's in the plan, or is it still kind of subjective of how many you're going to have in total? It seems like there was a lot of interest in that area.
There is a lot of interest in that area. Yeah, the development agreement stipulates that we are not able to do any more units than what you see right there. And there are a lot of pieces of that plan that have been well thought out. So that is what we plan to do.
Okay.
The shift to patio homes does a couple of things. It decreases sort of accessibility on the younger end of the scale because the patio homes will be a little more expensive. In addition to that, the density decreases such that it gets harder to offer what we're offering in the mixed use zone in a way that pencils. So I think, could we put more patio homes there? Well, clearly, the answer is yes. Could we do so without impacting other aspects of the community in a way we don't think is best overall? I don't think so. Other things would get taken away.
I have a question, I don't know if you can answer it, if Melinda knows, but that mixed-use unit, one on the very south side, that backs right behind the Smith's building, sorry, in the front.
Yeah, kind of bottom right.
Yeah. And how tall is that Smith's building? It seems to me, I drove past it today, like, that's pretty tall, so that's going to be a pretty smooth transition to that 3-story, don't you think?
I think so. I think the 3-story will be slightly taller. I don't know exactly what the height of the Smith's building is.
It's about 30, it's about 35, 40 clear height.
Is it 35, 40 clear height?
Yeah.
Then this would be a little shorter than that,
Wow.
if it's 35, 40. So yeah, I think, again, the goal was, as we, when I'm doing a home improvement project, I drive to Home Depot about 7 times in that day and drive back. And as I drive back, the goal really was, how do you drive back? I mean, the homes on Flint Street that were built there never anticipated Flint Street would be Flint Street, I don't think, in terms of traffic volume. I don't think they ever envisioned IHC would build a hospital where they did. It's just a busier street, right? So I think the goal for us, again, was as you drive north to south, how do you go from those single level, single family homes and kind of step it up in a way where when you get to Smith's, you almost go, oh, well, that felt kind of natural. That felt kind of normal. That was the idea, Rachel.
That makes sense, thanks.
A couple of questions. On your mixed use, your building seems a little bit chopped with 3 floors with the height limit that you have, especially with commercial on your ground floor. What is are you talking, I mean, usually it's at least 13 feet on your ground floor. Are you looking at that, or
Yeah, great question.
to be successful, I think you need to have that.
Yeah, you kind of need to. With the 35-foot clear height, we believe we'll be able to fit it right in. I said earlier, we admittedly would love to do 10-foot ceilings in the residential. It's actually more economical because there are less cuts with a miter saw than 9-foot. And so if we can, we would love to kind of do that. We think we can. Our architects think we can, providing nice rentable commercial space or rentable commercial space on the ground floor, and then the 2 levels.
Yeah.
We've been through code. We've kind of worked through how that works. The little in the artistic drawing, there was kind of some design variation on the artistic rendering. We believe we can still have that and have about 18 inches of that kind of height variation to play with in style. That's a great question.
Well, maybe a follow-up to that question is for staff. How do we define height? Every city is different. Is our height limit, is that to the highest point of the building, or is that to the midline of the coping? You see that language. Is that to the midline of the roof, or an average of the height?
We have the most horrible definition for height that I have ever had to work with.
Okay.
Honestly, it takes me like a pencil,
And
flow chart.
And I've seen it very versed on commercial.
But there are some concessions for additional height for your
Mixtures.
HVAC.
Okay.
That doesn't get included in the height. I think, I was just looking, I was trying to find in the code. I believe that the ground floor commercial is required to be 12 feet. And is it 12 or, either 12 or 13? I'll find
It's
that.
usually
13 is at the minimum you should have. But
So
And-
that ground floor does have that requirement to be that commercial
Okay.
height.
And I don't want to get lost in the details, but if we're going to ask those kinds of questions, I think they're really important to how successful that ground floor commercial can be. And on the height, I think it's very critical that as a city we allow flexibility for architectural design and flair, so that if we say that's the absolute top, what we're doing is we're really artificially hampering the success, the ability for the project to be successful. So if our definition is unclear and there's flexibility that can be applied, I certainly hope that in the review process, that can be given to the developer, because what we don't want is something that's not going to work because of a height limit that really nobody can say is scientifically based. They're all subjective based.
We really appreciate that comment. Again, economically, that is not our favorite space. in this plan. But it is, we believe, important space given where it is situated within the city.
Well, it's a good buffer.
The minimum height on a building fronting the major street is 12 feet, so.
On ground floor.
And that is, that is really the least amount of height you would want for commercial use.
And is there, I guess, another follow-up question, and I apologize, is there a restriction or a condition on the property that requires that the ground floor be retail, or can it be office? In some mixed-use projects, for example, when I worked with, you could not have office on the ground floor. It had to be retail.
We don't have that stipulation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just curious.
And also, Commissioner Allred, to answer your earlier question, there is a caveat, kind of a catch-all in the mixed-use zone that applies to the development standards, which gives the variations to the standards outlined may be altered by specific approval of the City Council in a development agreement when demonstrated that alternate standards are superior to those listed within this chapter. So the height could, in theory, differentiate from them from what is listed in the.
Yeah, that's good to know, because I don't think anybody would, certainly from the tone of the applicant and everything I've known about this project, what I can see is any kind of variation from what's been proposed would be minor. The bare minimum to achieve success of the project without sacrificing, important things for the neighborhood and for the other stakeholders. So thank you for answering those.
Great question.
I have a question, and this may be a bit premature and subjective, and I appreciate what you spoke about with the 4 stakeholders and with the city being a stakeholder. And one of the greatest interests is, in fact, that we do increase our options with moderate income housing. And I think we could make the assumption that, if they're townhomes or patio homes, that they would be. But I know in our neighboring communities, there are townhomes that are going up that are not moderate income housing. So I'm just curious, as you think about the finishes of these buildings, will they in fact be moderate income housing? I mean, if you were to build them, if they were built today, would they meet that definition?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the definition, I think, is the key, right? Definition is 80% of the county median and average. I'm not sure I'm saying that exactly right. AMI, thank you.
Area median income.
Yeah, 80% of AMI, right? The nice thing about those buildings along the front is that we can get closer to achieving that within those buildings than we can within townhomes. The reality of townhomes penciling is costs a certain amount of money to build those walls, right? And so those are a little bit tougher. We have not designed those townhomes with the idea that they would all hit 80% of AMI. Now they may, just because that's how they pencil, but that's not the idea there. We have more of that ability in those apartments up above the commercial, just because once you build the commercial, right, as long as we can do our job well and avoid miter saw cuts where we can avoid miter saw cuts and pick the right finish packages, we have a greater opportunity to do that. We have not, admittedly, wanted to get tied down to that because we believe that this development allows the city to achieve a positive reporting status back to the state, because it would be rezoning for more density and making that more accessible without sort of tying our hands on what's possible in a macroeconomic environment where if anybody knows what interest rates are going to be in about 12 months, I would love to talk to you after this. And I want to know where you buy your crystal ball. And so not tying our hands per se on that, getting that granular, it allows us to help the city achieve policy objectives and positive reporting status back to the state while still allowing some flexibility for this to be nice. I guess we sort of felt like we were pushing the line a little bit, bringing this forward in Kaysville. So we felt like the right balance here would be to say, let's rezone for more density. If we can get this density, we can look at it in some of those units along the front. We can't guarantee it. I wouldn't feel good about that. If you want to guarantee it, we would have to increase the density a little bit to guarantee what those check sizes would be. We can guarantee that those will be more affordable than most of the single-family homes in Kaysville. And that was what was important to us. Sort of going back to those project goals, we kind of said, well, selfishly, where would my mom want to live when she can't take care of her house? And so is this a place she could, she's not going to live alone in apartments, right? My son and his wife someday with one little child, they probably will. And so we can look at it in a few of the units, but have not felt as though we could just guarantee it no matter what in the current economic environment. Great question.
So I have a question for staff then. Do you think that we are, with the mixed use overlay in the front, is that going to be moving in the right direction to please the state? I don't know if the audience is aware that not just are they asking us to do things, but we will lose funding if we don't comply. And so it's really important that we provide some moderate income housing, or they take away the funding that pays for our roads and other things. And we don't want them to choose where it goes. We want to choose where it goes as a city. So, but that's my question for you, Melinda.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. This is the first year that the state has actually done compliance reviews on the plans. We've been required for several years now to submit annual moderate income housing plan or reporting to the state. This is the first time that they've checked for compliance review, ensuring that the plans that were submitted are in their mind compliant with state code. I mentioned earlier we were one of 19 of the 83 that were required that were compliant. I think to answer your question, I think that, or I would hope that the state would have a mindset that just because we put something in our general plan doesn't necessarily mean it's something we have to do. I mean, that's not what a general plan is. But we would want to look at as you do with a rezone, compatibility with the existing area. Does this rezone request make sense? You can have all of the reasons in the world through a general plan or a future land use map to approve it, but it still may not feel right. So I think to give an answer, we do have 2 items that we've selected and told the state that we're going to follow through on for rezoning for densities that would facilitate more affordable housing, and one of those is directly linked into mixed-use developments and near commercial centers. So my concern would be in October of next year when we go back and report to the state, hey, we had this application come through and we denied it. That would be something the state, I think, would frown upon. Now, if we had really great reasons for denying that, I think in the end that is our prerogative to approve or deny things.
I think what I'm asking, is this going to be significant enough to kind of meet
Melinda,
the goals of the
just
state?
a thought on your question, Rachel. I think it's a great question. The second of the 2 points Melinda's suggesting, and if you go back and look at the wording, the second of the 2 points she's suggesting has a really important word in it. The word is "or." And that is really important in terms of reporting to the state, because in our view, what we're doing allows you to go back to the state and say, look, we have rezoned for developments that provide higher density or affordable housing. And not only that, we rezoned property that provided higher density adjacent to commercial centers and those things. And I wish I had that second bullet point memorized, but as you read that second bullet point, what we're doing is exactly what it says, and I would think you'd be able to report the city and say, hey, example 1A, we're making progress.
Yeah, so I think maybe having a better understanding of what your question is, the state doesn't dictate you, community, Kaysville has to have this amount or this percent. But what they want to see, so the first half of our neighborhood chapter is a bunch of data. Right, I said 92% of the residential housing in Kaysville is single family. We would report back on those figures next year, and let's say this development gets approved and that moves it to 91%, and now we have
It is
an
actually
additional.
1%, by the way.
Is it
Is that-
1%?
Yeah, so we have about 8,000 and change single-family homes.
Yeah. So we would say, look,
We're
it's only
moving in the right
1%,
direction.
but we've added 80 something, and that's, and that's moving the needle. So my understanding is that the state wants to see progress. And if 1% is the progress that we make, then that's 1%. There's no prescribed number or percentage or ratio that we have to have.
Great question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, you can go ahead and sit down.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Actually, yeah.
Oh.
One more question.
Sorry.
Just, in my professional experience, I've noted that there's two ways of looking at things. Architects will say God is in the details, and planners and others will say the devil is in the details, right? I've moved from the devil side over to the God side, but I do have a technical question about some of the aesthetic components. Will those things come later on with a submittal to the staff? Because I know that, again, the details are so critical on things like lighting and the operation of lighting, the height of the poles in the parking lots, when lights come on and off, the color of the lighting spectrum, those kinds of things make a huge difference to neighbors and to those who work and live in, in the project here because it's mixed use. So I'm curious about those kinds of things. Will the trail be lit? Are we going to have directionals? Are we going to have wayfinding for the trail? Those kinds of little things. The development agreement is fairly short compared to some I've seen. So I don't know if there's going to be proposals to that, or is that just something that's going to be turned in by your architects and your designers? So just a curious question, because I think it makes the difference between a mediocre project and a really, really good one.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it does make all the difference. And let me give you maybe two anecdotes, and I know Melinda's bringing stuff up. There is a section in the development agreement about architecture. It's fairly brief,
Yeah.
but it does at least say, here's generally what's happening.
Yeah.
I think there's 2 points that I want to make. Three. One, you're exactly right. You can do a lot of things poorly, and you can do a lot of things well, and they can have the same shape. And so that's important. I think number two, we are in those details from a practical perspective. In fact, I can tell you, if we don't put the light in the right place on the northeast corner, upper right-hand side, I'm going to have certain individuals not going to be very happy with me, because right now there is a light pole in the Smith's development that shines across this field, shines into her master bedroom window, and she has put some blinds in that window that she's tried to use to black that out, but it still bothers her and causes her headaches. So I guess some of the comfort I can give you is that I know that. And there are some shades and things like that you can put on some of those lightings on one side that can help with that. So I think at some point you sort of have to balance, okay, has this developer done enough homework today and demonstrated enough homework that we think they're likely to engage in the process? We would propose that we are that type of a developer. And I think number two, we're also sort of at a point, and I think a city has to consider, we're at a point where we're saying, okay, we've spent about $75,000 of our own money getting to this point. There's a point where risk reward says, I'm good until I know I can build it. And so you kind of have to balance, like, what level of detail do I need to get into before I know I can actually build it? And there is a risk reward there. And so I am willing to spend $75,000 to get up before you and have the chance to have this dialogue. That's a really expensive meeting.
Yeah.
But I believe that it makes sense. Beyond that, I think we have to ask ourselves as a community, do we want to ask people to spend more than that to nail down every little detail before they know they can build it?
No, absolutely not.
And that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, and I hesitated to ask that
No, it's a
question
great question.
because I'm not familiar with the city process that I'd like to be.
And I
So
didn't think you were, but
No.
I did just want to kind of raise it, right? I think that's the balance.
Of course.
It's like, gosh,
course.
what do you do
No,
there? And so we're trying to kind of find that spot.
I think you know where I'm coming from.
There's another,
And
there's,
you're exactly right.
And I'll just interject real quick, there's another city in the south that I submitted plans to for another project I worked on for a company I was employed with, and they want everything up front. And so your development costs are about $150,000 by the time you get done with Provo, but they want everything up front. And it's expensive to develop in Provo because of that, and developers are gun shy down there because they want all your plans from front to back.
So we bought a city block in Provo. We're doing development there right now, and the only reason we were willing to do it is because we had zoning for unlimited density. So the risk reward changes, right? And in that particular spot, it makes sense. But the risk reward equation changed such that we were willing to kind of double our risk because there was frankly double the reward, and that's how life works. So, Paul, your question is wonderful. I hope I'm okay in being as blunt as I was in the response. But it sort of comes down to, well, if you have to kind of look at demonstrated history of kind of action and pattern and what have they done. And I can tell you one thing, there are two individuals seated right there that will kill me if I tarnish their name, and I'm not about to do that because I would have 175 years of flints at my front door every night, and I would prefer not to do that. Great question. Other questions?
I think we're good. All right. We'll now transition into the public hearing, and just make sure to reiterate the ground rules. 3 minutes per person. For each person, you're not allowed to give your time to someone else, so it's just 3 minutes per person. Just out of curiosity, by a raise of hands, how many people want to comment? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I was just curious because, I mean, we're about 2 hours in, so I just want to make sure that we're going to be at a reasonable time getting done. So it looks like that we can do that. That's fine. So as you come forward to the podium, please state your name, and then we'll have
Address.
You'll be timed, and then it will be a warning at 3 minutes. So I'd just ask you to cut off and be respectful of that if you hear that warning, time warning. Okay, the public hearing is open.
Hi, my name is Jake Garn, and appreciate very much John and Shauna Flint opening up their home so many times. I can tell you that in the 5 years I served on the Planning Commission and 4 years on the City Council, I have never seen an owner, landowner, open up their home five or six times. I didn't go to every one, but so many times to have us to hear the neighbors' comments, and also Greg Nelson and developers have been very transparent and very nice to hold these meetings. Would it be possible to put back up the project map? Thank you. I'll keep talking while you're bringing that up. I really agree. You know, I finished my city council service at the end of 1999, and we were already getting into some of these issues. But it's beautiful. The new general plan is very, very well done. The new changes and everything. So I'm aware of many of these issues on housing and the state's rules on that. And I really can't find fault with everything about this project makes sense. And even when I was on the Planning Commission, I was probably unpopular in having the position that we shouldn't just have higher density in one part of the city, but it should be in West Kaysville too, and that half-acre lots weren't necessarily the best way to ensure green space and open space and high-quality living if they're all covered with just fences and that. So I get all that, and I would also have to say though, when I was looking at 25 years ago planning my house is the one that's right next to those two on the very northwest end right there, next to the 2 units. I probably wouldn't have anticipated when I was looking at floodplain maps and liquefaction potential on my lot, you know, that someday I'd have this and higher density next to me. So it probably would not have been my first choice, but I would definitely be hypocritical if I support this for all the reasons that are stated. And when it was next to me, then I didn't support it. But so I do generally support the plan, and maybe I'll just focus on mitigation. A couple of more positive things, though. I do think it's nice to have diversity in age groups within our neighborhood and within our congregation, which I think this will help with that. And also the fact that there's going to be a property manager. I don't know if that was mentioned or not, but to take care of, to keep it nice and everything, that, I think that's another positive aspect. So mitigating factors, if you notice that curve right there, and they mentioned some of them, and that's great, and I get we can't get into all the details, but there's just a couple of things. One would be, on that curve, that's kind of a blind corner, and going both directions, I'm wondering, you do have the one kind of mitigation right there, but I wonder if there could be another one going the opposite direction, maybe one more pinch point right at the entry to the subdivision, because that way that could slow traffic in both directions, both from our existing neighborhood and also from the new neighborhood. And then the only other thing, if the median at some point, this is kind of unrelated to the project, but I think it's a little dangerous. I don't dispute the traffic study at all, but to have the median, so when cars, that's important that it's down there, so when cars are trying to turn left, they can pull out of the median first. But if the median could be extended all the way down to the four-way stop, that's about another 300 yards, because it is a little bit scary even now to pull out, or to turn left or to pull out left. So that would be maybe one other mitigating factor. My time's up, so I don't want to take any more time for other residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary Mumford, 1504 Willow Drive. I'll be brief because you have my written comments. I appreciate John and Shauna Flint holding meetings regarding the proposed development of their farmland. In the first meeting, the development team told the neighbors there would be transition between Smith's Marketplace and the existing homes to the north. The plan submitted to you has apartments and commercial space right next to one of the 5 existing homes. That doesn't seem like a transition. Examples of great transition in West Kaysville are the Hill Farms development and the development south of Boondocks, where large lots were placed right next to the existing homes. Also, in the first meeting, the development team said that patio homes would be next to the existing homes, and that these patio homes would be ideal for an elderly neighbor, or elderly mother. The patio homes now appear to be 2-story homes with stairs. On September 2nd, I asked the development team to add a small visitor lot in the west portion of the community or provide private driveways. Guests and overnight visitors in the west portion of the community will be parking in the existing neighborhood. This will negatively impact the existing neighborhood. Nowhere on Flint Street are there 3-story buildings. 2-story apartment buildings will be more compatible with the surrounding buildings. I encourage you to include in your motion actions regarding the following 4 items. 1, greater transition from commercial to existing homes so that all 5 existing homes to the north have appropriate transition as per the developer's original promise. 2, a commitment from the developer of a certain number or percent of units that will be without stairs for people of all ages and physical abilities as per the general plan. These less expensive, smaller homes or twin homes would also help the city comply with the state mandate for greater moderate income housing. 3, provide for a small visitor parking lot in the west portion of the development to help mitigate the negative impact on the existing neighborhood. And 4, limit apartment and commercial buildings to 2 stories to be more compatible with the surrounding buildings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony Powell. I live at 1444 Flint Court, immediately adjacent or north of the proposed development. I've submitted some comments to you in writing and referred to those to you. Just wish to reiterate a little bit based on the discussion we've heard today. A request of the Planning Commission to consider some additional transition beyond what is proposed Similar to previous comments, I would look to see any development or any building north of that road not include any commercial space. The request to reduce the size of those buildings is very appropriate. The developer seemed to address the comments that this was either we have this level of density or we have a really lack of amenities or quality or other factors. I would respectfully disagree with that this level of density is unprecedented in Kaysville. I acknowledge the fact that we do need to address things with affordable housing. I believe that there is a compromise there that could additionally be made to decrease that, especially as we look towards the transition areas there back to the neighborhood. The comments that it does not impact the existing neighborhood to the north, I strongly disagree with. 82 homes connected into a neighborhood that has previously for 20 years been a dead-end road will have an impact. And so I would look for some mitigation there with the density considerations that are proposed in the plan. So, and I'll leave my other comments in writing and appreciate you reviewing those and giving that consideration. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Brenda Mumford, and I live just barely west of this, at the skinny end there of the development. Then my house is just on the other side of the trail there. I've been where you are, served 6 years on a planning commission in a city in this county, and I know these are hard decisions to make. I'm generally in favor of the zoning request to change this to RM because I think we do need some additional housing types. And one thing I would point out is that just west of the Smith's store, you'll probably know that just in the last couple of years a development was put on there right on 200 North. Those are single-family homes, 2-story single-family homes that are close together, small lots. And so we have that kind of housing right there in that neighborhood already. So we've already been impacted by additional housing that are not the R120 that we're used to in all that neighborhood there with half-acre lots. And we understand that there's need from the state to provide additional kinds of homes. And so I'm supportive of these townhomes going in, and especially adjacent to Smith's, because nobody really wants to have their nice big home right next to the grocery store with the traffic of the semis coming in there and so forth. So that's a good use there to have those. I'm not so happy with what they call patio homes. The patio homes that I'm aware of are 1-story homes that are good for older people. They keep calling these patio homes, but they're 2-story with lots of stairs and 4 in a unit right there behind a large home. So you can see it from the map that we have 4 homes right in back of a large home there. And that's not exactly a great transition. I think maybe twin homes or true patio homes, maybe 2 of them behind each home would be a better transition than 4 behind those large homes. One of the general plan things says that, to the greatest extent possible, you want to have something similar, and so I think that would be. I'm also a little concerned about the one unit there next, the one that's the mixed-use home, or 2-story unit, just that it is next to an existing home on Flint, and that property was a home until a couple years ago when that was taken down. And so that would be a better transition to still be a home and then still have these other units down here. I too am in favor of having 2-story rather than 3-story. We just don't have anything like that on the west side. Maybe out closer to where Legacy comes in, it'd be a better place to have something like that or more density. There still are other opportunities for higher density areas in the city than just this one property. And even though we want to have a lot of mixed use, it doesn't all have to be in one development of 6.5 acres. And so I think we could still mitigate that a little bit and not have quite as much density. When you consider that the underlying density would be 7 homes in this, if it was just a residential area, then to go to 82 units is a lot of density. And so even though they're saying they could have more than that, up to 77 in that area, I think 82 is a lot. And I would rather see that somewhat mitigated. But appreciate the Flints and the meetings that they've had and the legacy they want to leave for their posterity. And we understand from the developers that this is a build-to-rent proposal, so that they will be in charge of those townhomes and the apartment units, and that would be an ongoing revenue stream for a long time for the family, and that's fine, and they'll take care of those properties. So, thank you.
Anybody else would like to comment? If you'll come back up to the podium, please.
One thing we didn't understand was how garbage would work in there with those long shared driveways in the townhomes and so forth. Does that mean everybody brings their garbage cans out to the street, or how does that work?
We can, and we'll have the, yeah,
Service provider will determine.
we'll have the applicant back up so we can have them address that, yeah. All right, anybody else would like to comment for the public hearing? Okay, we'll close the hearing, and then we'll have the applicant come back up and they can address some of the questions that have been posed.
Yeah, maybe just two things to say. I think on the garbage question, that's really a service provider issue. And so, again, it's sort of that balance of, we believe as we work with city staff, there are options here to get trash in and out effectively without having trash out on the road in preliminary discussions with the service provider. Again, without knowing if this is approved or not, we didn't want to spend hours and hours and hours with the service provider on exactly where the truck would turn and how it would turn. Those involved believe that this is an adequate plan and that it would work for trash. I think the second question is, I would love to get a hold of some of these patio home housing plans that sounds like people have. We don't have them. We believe these patio homes that are proposed would allow a mix of single story and then some that do have a loft as a second story. I'll tell you why. My mother, who I've mentioned, she had a friend that lived on Main Street in Farmington. That woman lived alone until she died when she was in her late 90s. My mom, when she was in her 50s, was saying, boy, someday I might want a house without stairs. And this good friend said, oh, Becky, just quit complaining and get on your butt and move up the stairs. And now I don't know that's the right thing for everybody, but we envision at least half of these, if not a majority of the patio homes, will not have stairs. Do I know exactly yet? No, I don't, because we haven't got down that far. So I guess I would just posit that I'm not sure where the emphatic statements about what those floor plans will look like are coming from, because I'm not sure we're that far into it, other than to know that the footprints that we've looked at with the architects will allow some of both. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. All right, commissioners, we'll open up to discussion amongst ourselves.
Can I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Since this is my last meeting, and I've volunteered my time for 3 years, I'm going to take a little more time.
Go ahead.
When I met with Mayor Kathy Witt 3 years ago, and she asked me why I was interested in serving on this planning commission, I said, because I've lived here 25 years, I've raised 6 daughters. We love Kaysville, but I'm worried that there's not enough affordable housing for my kids and grandkids. And of my 6 daughters, only one can afford to live in Kaysville right now. The rest live in Centerville or Layton or other places, and they'd love to be here where they grew up, but they can't. And so that was one of my motivations. Of all of the presentations I've heard in 3 years of this type, this is without a question the most well thought out, the best outreach to neighbors, the most thorough presentation that I've seen. So I want to congratulate the Flint family and the developer for what they've done. The outreach is extraordinary. It doesn't mean everyone agrees with what's being proposed, but there has to be compromises. Now, I'm a retired contractor and a developer, and in my retirement, I'm doing a renovation of a home in Farmington. And one of the workers today, who's doing the tile work in this home, we were talking, and I'm paying him $50 an hour. So it's good wage, and he's worth every penny of it. And as we were talking, he was just finishing up his work today, and as we were talking, and we'd become friends. His name's Eric. He lives up in Salt Lake County. And he said, you know, so $50 an hour, if he works every day, 5 days a week for a year, he's making $100,000. And he's got 2 daughters, and he said to me as we were kind of saying goodbye and hopefully see you on the next project, he said, we can't afford a house on my salary. And I thought, that's a travesty. $50 an hour, and I can't afford a house. This guy's like 38 years old, great guy, great father. He went to a recital for his daughter tonight, and he was telling me about that. And at $50 an hour, he cannot afford a house. So we're renting. And then he said, my rent's gone up $400 this last year. And it's really hard to afford that kind of hit. And I just thought, this is what's wrong with so much of Utah. This is why the state legislature is if we don't get grips with the growth in the state and the lack of affordable or attainable housing, the state will start dictating and go around city councils and planning commissions. I think, Melinda, that's fair to say, isn't it? They will start mandating these types of issues because we are not coming to grips with the affordability of housing in Utah. We're just not. There's too many people that just say, not in my backyard, so go do it somewhere else. Well, that somewhere else doesn't come in Kaysville. And so here we got a proposal of a mixed-use development where people can live and work in the same place, minimizes traffic. It's right next to a big retail development where they can walk to shop. And there's a sensitivity of a transition and buffering. And as I went through Melinda's presentation, I checked off 10 boxes that make this development make sense. The first was the general principle of preserving existing neighborhoods, but accommodating economic lifestyle and life cycle needs of residences. I think with the need to get more attainable housing, this is as good as I've seen in 3 years. I haven't seen a better presentation. The next goal in Chapter 1, Goal 7, was buffering. You've got great buffering and at significant expense. You've got trails that tie into the community trails and the county trails that are worked into this plan that you just don't see. And in too many developments because it costs too much. But they can afford it because of the density they've got here. So we can't attack the density and hopefully the more attainable housing pricing with that density and have the kind of amenities you have here that tie into the existing amenities if we attack their density. The next goal, Chapter 1, Goal 8, provide a range of housing options and prices. Checks that box. You've got apartments, you've got townhomes, you've got patio homes, and a twin home. And the developer is willing to look at the patio homes to accommodate people that don't like to navigate stairs. So I think that's very positive. The next check box that's checked is Chapter 1, Goal 8, provide a range of housing options and prices. Oh, sorry. Transportation and connectivity. You've got that. You don't have dead-end streets so that people all have to go down one street because there's too many dead-end streets, which is a problem in Kaysville. You can go right through this area, and that's a plus that checks that box in the general plan. You've got the community trail connection, another box that's checked. You've got the Chapter 2, Goal 1, preserve enhanced access to and from the greater region. You're a block from 2nd North. You can hit I-15 on the east and the east quarter on the west, or the west quarter on the west, and get to where you need if you're going north or south really quick. And this location is as good as it gets to tie into that box to check, to get people not driving through the streets of Kaysville, but getting out to the major corridors because it's close to a major corridor street. You've got the state requirement for moderate housing that was mentioned. If we don't approve developments like this, we could lose state funding. The state is serious about cities and counties or towns providing solutions for more attainable housing. And we don't know how serious they are, Melinda, but I think everything we've heard the state is ready to take off the gloves in that regard. They will hold back money if cities don't show they provide more attainable housing, right? World War III, okay? So the state is gonna, I think we're one step away, aren't we, from them mandating, maybe 2 steps? We're close. I mean, they've been ratcheting it up for several years. So that box is checked. Moderate housing, check. Traffic study, that box is checked. They paid for the money to show that this is not going to impact the neighbors around us. So thank you for the expense of that. And then the guiding principle in our 2022 general plan that we spent a lot of money and a lot of time to produce, that provides diverse housing options, checks that box. And last but not least, the staff recommended this after all the thorough review that's done. So for all of those 10 boxes that have checked, and in 3 years of sitting here, this is the best presentation. And it would be a travesty, with some tweaks I'm sure that'll happen as it goes through the approval process, but it would be a travesty not to approve this. And thanks for letting me get on my soapbox, because this is my last meeting.
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I'd like to thank my fellow commissioner for an absolutely brilliant summation of the project and the presentation. I've been involved in planning and zoning issues for 32 and a half years out of the last 34. And this is one of the best presentations, best outreaches, and best proposals for a property that I've seen in that time. And believe me, I've seen a lot of development in my lifetime. So I really appreciate what you just said, Commissioner, and I want to lend my support for the project based on, once again, I'm going to say that I really think our staff has just done a terrific job of just going down the requirements, looking at our ordinances and our codes and our goals, and then factoring subjective things in too about our feelings and everything. And I just think this has been handled very, very well by the community. And I think the comments from our residents have been really good too. They have not been over the top screechy. They haven't been, pitchforks and torches. We've had measured responses, reasonable responses, but I think generally there's good support for this, and there should be. It's just high time that we stop looking at land as something that we can just waste. It is not a renewable resources. We can't go buy it in buckets and pour it out on the ground and create more land area. We've made horrible mistakes and wasted a lot of ground. I'm one of the culprits. I bought a half-acre lot 26, 27 years ago off of Shepherd Lane. I've loved living there. I was 36 when I bought it. I'm almost 62. I can't take care of that half acre anymore. I just don't have the heart for it or really great health for it. And we have done this repeatedly. We've taken the whole west side and said, we're going to lock this up to be wasteful with our land. And so, not to belabor the point, but I think we all have played a role in perhaps not looking far enough into the future. And planning is, what is planning? Is my professional career, and I'm telling you, we fail as communities and even sometimes as municipal officials to look far enough into the future. We tend to look just past this meeting, let's get past this, and then move on to the next one. We can't do that. We have to take a far look, and I think this project does that. It does it in spades. I mean, we should support this, and so I'm just pretty simple. There's no reason not to support the rezone and the concerns I think we have in terms, at least I have, speaking just for myself, the concerns I have about the real details which make the difference between good and great or bad and really acceptable, I think need to be hashed out, and I think the developer and the city can do that. I hope that can be done. So that's it. Thank you for listening.
I'll go. I appreciate the presentation. I think it answered and checked all the boxes. I come from a municipal background. I've done development. I think that the adding housing choice and housing availability works. Putting this in this mixed use is a good buffer between the commercial space and the neighborhood. I drive past that all the time. I look at that big green field there and think, you know, what would work there? This works, in my opinion. And I think it's, you know, in the time frame and everything, it is a good density for that. It's connected, and it provides connectivity. As we've looked through the general plan the last 2 years and putting that together, I think it's nice to have the connectivity with the trail system. As we know, active transportation is a big part of that, and I think that's a piece that people in the community enjoy and like, and I think it brings that into there. This is well thought out, very well thought out presentation, and I don't see, you know, anything that could go wrong. I mean, I grew up in the Sugar House area. This reminds me of that area where you have that 9th and 9th feel, 9th South, 9th East in Salt Lake, and where you have the Sugar House 11th East and 21st South. Those neighborhoods, you see that buffers those neighborhoods, those historic neighborhoods back there. This does the same thing for those neighborhoods, and I think it'll actually provide some of that nice contiguous flow and actually probably buffer some of the commercial activity going on. And probably to our surprise, we'll see people walking. My neighborhood just down the street, 200 North in Angel, we had 22 55 and older houses go in. The developer, Brad Frost, put those in, and he sold 90% of them even before they were built. So I think this is a product. I know it's a BFR, build for rent project. This probably will have the same absorption as that. And it's a great product for the city, and it will bring many people in and probably absorb people who are already here, who have a half acre, who don't want to leave the city. So I don't see anything. It checks all the boxes.
I would just comment, and I think this was probably picked up in the question that I asked the developer. I agree wholeheartedly with everything that my fellow commissioners have said, but I think it's important to keep in consideration in mind that density is not synonymous with affordability. Correct. So I think with the applicant and the developer, that we would hope that they would hold to their word that there would be a variety of those things here, but we need not look any further than Farmington for examples of there is developments of high density but not affordability. And so I think that's just something that we have to consider, as that has been a basis of tonight in the presentation, the proposals, that yes, we hope for that, and it is needed by the city, and we are not a body that would guarantee that.
Nope. The market guarantees it.
I agree with Cody. I think everything checks all the boxes. I'm especially pleased to see this being proposed in West Kaysville. Majority of the apartments in Kaysville are in East Kaysville. I've lived here for 20 years in both East Kaysville and West Kaysville. I think we need to spread out the diversity of housing. So I think there's a lot of benefits that come with diverse housing. So I'm really happy about this. I agree with Cody. We're expecting to see the developer follow through and be true to their word, and I don't anticipate that not happening. So.
Yeah, I agree. I feel that this development opportunity has been very thoughtful and thorough, and I love all of the attention to detail, the line of sight, the different parts where you kind of raise the street to help slow down the speed. I love the fact that there's a second access exit point into the community. Even though the traffic study came back that it was no impact, having children go to Lightbox for years, making a left turn so it's off the side of the street, it's a mess. But is that a reason to deny this? Absolutely not. And when I say mess, it does depend on time of day, it depends on where you're going, and you just end up going the other way, so maybe you'll just get more traffic to the Smiths Arena, and at least there's a light closer that way, because coming from Lightbox, you'd have to go over by the hospital and right, instead of going it's the opposite way. You guys know what I'm talking about. I live there. But I do travel this area frequently, and for years I've also wondered, like, what is going on there? Like, there's just this vacant land. Like, it just, in my mind, it also just naturally made sense that there should be some mixed use, and even though I didn't verbalize it that way, in my mind I always would think, like, I love the land. I love when the sunset goes down right there, and just the beautiful green acreage. It's just beautiful. But at the same time, I thought that would be a nice division between the grocery store and the homes. Like, what could that be? And so this seems like something better than I could have even dreamt of what it would look like. And I feel like it will add in not only alignment to our general plan in our city, but also just add that diversity. And to Commissioner Branch's point, it is tough with the affordability issue, but perhaps this will be more affordable than the other options that maybe it was initially proposed if you were just to flat out do half acre for each one. So with that being said, I definitely would recommend this, and wow, a lot of thought put into it, so well done.
Yeah, and I'd just like to commend the applicant and your outreach to the community for your dialogue with the applicant. This has been like I think the best process we've seen, like a lot of other people have said. So thank you to everyone for your respectful dialogue and seeing this through. And to me, I echo the comments that come before. It checks all the boxes for me. I think this is a great development. And so with that being said, I would entertain a motion if someone would like to do so.
I would like to make a motion to recommend to the City Council the rezone for John V. and Shauna Flint
391.
on 391 North Flint Street from an A1 light agricultural district to an RM multifamily residential district with a mixed-use zoning district overlay.
And I'll second.
Would you like to include some findings of fact to support your motion?
I don't know if I want to tie any hands yet until there's more investment put into the development and they know they've got it approved. I don't feel the need to do that right now.
But do you, I'll just, on my second, I'll just, as recommended by staff.
Oh, as recommended by staff, yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, well said.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve, or to recommend approval to the City Council, and a second. So we'll start the voting with Commissioner Lyon.
Aye.
Aye.
We're going to go the other direction this time,
Oh.
okay? Commissioner Branch, we're going to go the other direction.
Oh, sorry. Aye.
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 All right, so the voting is unanimous in favor of recommending approval. So that will be forwarded to the City Council in January sometime. All right, so we have the next item of business is called to public. So if anybody would like to speak, it's kind of an open time for you to do that. So if anybody would like to come forward for a call to public. Okay, so we'll forego call to public due to lack of interest on that. And so we'll turn the time over to the staff for other matters of business for the reports, correspondence, and calendar.
So, members of the public, again, thank you for being here tonight. I do want to say I've really appreciated this process as well, and especially the respectful comments. I earlier today was lamenting on some of the career trauma I've had based on public comment period. So thank you for being the kind of people that I think Kaysville deserves. We will probably get this on the January 5th City Council meeting agenda. So look for that to come out. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't make it on the 5th of January. And that would be at 7 o'clock back here in this building. Just a couple of other things to report to the commission. I did send an email late today with the report or the opinion from the administrative law judge on the conditional use permit that we had back in September on the Weston Red property. So the law judge overturned 3 of the 4 conditions that were imposed on the council. I was able to find some code that supported the fence. That's a pretty common thing with developments. So we won't be bringing that back to the Planning Commission. He issued a final decision in that. So He'll be able to do 6 units. He'll just have to meet the parking requirements that we have outlined in code. And the write-in, write-out was determined to be arbitrary and capricious, meaning we didn't have a traffic study or any type of tangible data to back up having that mitigation measure there. So if you haven't had the opportunity yet, read through that, and I think we'll probably get that on a future meeting agenda where we can kind of just maybe understand some of the case laws and some of the state law that he pointed to with the opinion that he rendered. We may not need to have a meeting on the 22nd, so we're kind of hoping we don't need to have a meeting on the 22nd.
You want one? No, I say I would agree with that.
I don't know.
That is grand exit.
So at this point, I don't see anything compelling that we would need to have a meeting on the 22nd. If anything changes, we'll let you know as soon as we can, but I think we should plan on canceling that if you are okay with that. All right. I think that's all that I had. I do want to thank Commissioner Doxey for his time and service and wish him well in his upcoming endeavors. And to that end, members of the public that are still here and planning commissioners, we do have a vacancy. Applications are open through the end of next Friday. So if you have become intrigued by this process and want to participate, then you can go in and submit your application. The position is appointed by the mayor and then confirmed by the council. So if you know of anyone who would make a great planning commissioner, we have that vacancy. I think that's all that I have. Did you want to talk at all about Kaysville groups? I could talk all night about Kaysville groups. 30 seconds.
Okay, I get 30 seconds. We are in the process. We're just wrapping up Kaysville Gifts. We're in our 6th year of doing this. And we're helping do Christmas for 117 families right now. So we're getting all of the gifts. We're checking our lists and double checking them, and we'll have them all ready to deliver on Monday. Our community's been, I'm so sorry, the community has been phenomenal in donations, in volunteer hours, the gifts. We put tags on a website. We had 1,700 tags that we needed to fill this year, which was more, the need's been much greater than it has in the past. We've had Mayor Tran working with us. We've had a phenomenal committee that's been there to support us, and we'll be able to deliver Christmas on Monday, thanks to amazing businesses and residents in Kaysville. And it's my pleasure every year to get to do it. So.
All right. Well, those are our items of business, so I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
We're adjourned.
You didn't say that. Just
You could let him have the honor.
No, that's his phrase. He's got to do it.
Thanks for letting me some paper.
I know, it's going to be awesome. Take that right to my office.
So how's the new job treatment? You get through some of those crazy cities back east?
So Sunrise Engineering scooped me up.
Oh, you changed already?
Yeah, I was working and they came and offered me like crazy money, better hours, and
Not as much traffic.
so I'm 10 minutes from home. Yeah, my cousin's like, can we keep him? Like, yeah, so they thought it was price. If you think of anybody in economic development, if you think of somebody in economic development, it's not Susie's Becker shop. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know.
We're trying to compete with them.
Yeah,
Is this for us to take? Yeah. Put it in a bath ball? I told him, okay, it's for him. No, seriously, Darren came like, I didn't get her.
I'm interested. To me, the stories that I got from that I got right Kaysville, actually, I was just tolerable. I didn't even, I still, and I feel where everything is. I look at my wife, and it's like, so what you pull a crossball right through them? Yeah. So, is that going for
How are you being able to try something? Yeah, our closest neighbors. So I can appreciate it. That's what's funny when we have these exchanges. Anytime it's a West case, all these people they come over. This is what we wanted. The time right next to you, the other one's here. She's one that was like, well, my sister's working again, it's my dog. Thank you. We are. We're your boys. This is our 3 to 5 year house. But now with house prices, it's like, all right, we're going to be here forever.